Prager University Foundation is a tax-exempt corporation, best known for its videos about social issues in America and American history. Recently, it has been trying to inject its videos into the American public school system, and its videos have been roundly criticized for being full of disinformation, for justifying things like slavery, and for doggedly pushing a narrative that, if you give the hippies an inch, they'll take a mile. And it's all because they don't fear God. But not just any old God. Specifically, Prager's God. Prager University, a non-profit that is not a university in any way and can award no qualifications whatsoever. A non-profit where the CEO pays themselves almost $1 million a year. Prager University, where the co-founder and namesake has recently gone on record saying that simulated child abuse imagery is in no way immoral, and they need your money to save America.
And all the claims of victimhood, all the whining, well, nobody cares.
Consists of suffering and malevolence.
One of the most watched personalities on the internet.
Who wants that?
I'm a big believer in common sense. Did you ever notice, and I make this point on my radio talk show in LA frequently, the way we use language is such a giveaway as to what people really think.
Before we get into Prager's history and its finances, in case you are not familiar with PragerU, most of their videos are pretty direct about the beliefs of their co-founder. In this video, What Are Judeo-Christian Values?, Dennis Prager more or less lays out his core beliefs, and these are inextricably wrapped around religion and politics together.
Without God, there is no moral truth, only moral opinions. The naive modern belief that man is basically good. God, not man, not government, not popular opinion, not a democratic vote, is the source of our rights. Only if we keep these values will we keep America, and for that matter, Western civilization.
He makes sweeping and incredibly generalized statements. No, I don't think all Protestants, Catholics, Mormons and Jews are aligned on almost every issue. Absurd. In the secular world, free will does not exist. Obviously I have to agree with that, that's in the big book of everything all atheists believe. The two religions need each other, Prager says, although I doubt this is a sentiment supported by all of Prager viewers. But more revealing than that is Prager's assertion that the modern belief that man is basically good is naive, and indeed, he gives us this wonderful soundbite.
We need God-based rules to keep us from our natural inclinations.
What Dennis Prager believes is that without a society-wide belief in a Judeo-Christian God, really his interpretation of a Judeo-Christian God, a society will collapse. Because without God, and the fear of God, man is inherently bad. And his shtick is pretty straightforward. He uses the word inherently a lot, because he presents his opinion as fact. Not only as fact, but as inherent, undeniable, obvious fact. Prager seems to believe that this idea of humans being inherently bad is what defines modern American conservatives. He posits that liberals cannot stomach this difficult truth, and so have invented other reasons to explain away evil. An example of this, which is a good example of PragerU's arguments in general, is this.
Why are many young black males in prison? The reason is too painful for the left to acknowledge, and therefore it is politically incorrect to say it. Young black males commit a disproportionate amount of violent crime.
It's not politically incorrect to say young black males commit a disproportionate amount of violent crime, but of course it is politically incorrect and factually incorrect to say because they're black. And as we're talking about difficult truths and inherent traits, and as he implies that social causes are just excuses, what else am I meant to think Dennis Prager means here? He's not asking, why this might be the case, he's using it as an example of difficult truths. Also, that's not what politically incorrect means, you doddering old Bad Lebowski-esque finger sausage. But that's just like my opinion, man. I'm not going to try and sell it as the word of God.
If they write, they lie. If they speak, they lie. Because truth is not a left-wing value.
So Prager, who calls himself transparent, here at this Moms for Liberty summit, equates left-wing with communism and explicitly states that the left-wing, his idea of the left-wing, are anti-truth. But in the same few minutes he also says, "I'm a Jew. You think I'd be here if this group supported Hitler?" right before reading the Hitler quote the group used in its newsletter. He is honest. He wants to fight what he thinks is left-wing indoctrination, especially of children, not with the truth, but with his counter-doctrine, and the truth that he was taught. But we'll get back to this. It also makes so much more sense when you find out how all this started. PragerU was founded by Dennis Prager and Alan Estrin in 2009, becoming functional in 2010. Estrin was a screenwriter, perhaps most notable for co-writing Pocahontas 2. He now works as a producer for PragerU. Dennis Prager, born in 1948, started his career interviewing and relaying the experience of Soviet Jews. From 1976 to 1983, he ran the Brandeis Bardin Institute, an LA retreat-type camp for Jewish children, teens, and young adults, and which is now part of the private American Jewish University. In 1982, his radio career began when KAMC Radio, in LA, hired him for a weekly show. That show got good ratings, and soon Prager had a weekday show. Never shy from sharing his political views and moral criticism, Prager became a well-known host on the Christian radio and TV circuit, voicing various views, from AIDS being a crisis manufactured by the left, to same-sex marriage being a natural gateway to incest.
I have a very dark sense of humor.
Much of PragerU's initial investment came from Dan and Ferris Wilks. They were hydraulic fracturing pioneers in the oil industry and made billions from fracking. By 2015, they'd seeded more than $6.5 million to Prager, and as of 2023, they are, taken as one, the 12th largest landowners in America, with 672,000 acres, more than two-thirds the size of Rhode Island.
You know, in our culture, men have been marginalized, and our place as men and leaders in the home is under attack.
Ferris Wilks is now a pastor in his own church, and has called abortion a great sin, and labelled homosexuality a perversion tantamount to bestiality, paedophilia, and incest. Indeed, the doctrine of his church labels abortion and homosexuality as serious crimes, and states that women cannot lead religious assemblies, but must remain silent. Most importantly, I think, is the very first doctrinal point, that translations of the Bible aren't necessarily without error, but that the original Bible is true in every scientific and historical detail, as if it was all written all at once, not by people, but by God. But we have evidence that it wasn't written by God. So, there you go. Worth mentioning too, in 2015, Ferris Wilks put up $4.7 million to start the Daily Wire, and to this day, he is one of the owners of Bentkey, which owns the Daily Wire. Although the Wilks have been involved with PragerU, and briefly appeared on its board at the same time they established the Daily Wire, it seems that now their money, at least, is no longer needed. Prager is raking it in. Prager taxes for 2022 show that they spent $45 million and raised $65 million, and are now sitting on $77 million of assets. whereas in 2021 it was 61 million. In 2020 it was 37 million. In 2019 it was 21 million. And although they are non-profit, and although I don't doubt they're saving the money to make an epic Atlas Shrugged adaptation that will show all those Hollywooders what's what, they're paying themselves very well. Well, the directors are. So although they're separate entities, the Daily Wire and PragerU are really two very similar outlets, and PragerU uses many familiar faces from the Daily Wire and elsewhere. Ben Shapiro has made at least 6 videos for PragerU. The videos, which are really the driving force of PragerU, are quite varied in just how much of the Wilks Prager Actual agenda they present. Their video on what to do if you're pulled over by the cops doesn't have much political agenda in it, more or less teaching kids, I suppose, that they should respect the police and also fear them. Which I would agree with. You should be terrified.
Make all your movements slow and deliberate. This way the officer will be at ease and know that you are not one of those sketchy situations.
Their recent video about nuclear waste is mostly pretty reasonable, although it does take shots at renewable energy that seem both unnecessary and childish. There is an amusing video, one of their best in terms of views, without much agenda or meaning, where Tim Pool bitterly describes how successful he is. These are the minority, however. A recurring theme of PragerU stuff is that facts don't care about your feelings, and when they talk about the left, their version of it, they make clear that leftism is based on feelings and is in denial of the truth. But almost all their videos present opinion as fact, and many seem focused on feelings, specifically feelings about America and its history. In A Short History of Slavery, Candace Owens, who is married to the CEO of Parler, George Farmer, net worth $180 million, presents an apologetic explanation of slavery, with numerous factual errors and an obvious bias. To paraphrase, slavery isn't good, but it was normal, so it wasn't bad, and the UK abolished slavery in 1833, meaning white men were the first people in the world to abolish slavery. Never mind Denmark abolishing chattel slavery in 1792, or France losing control of Haiti during its revolution, and Haiti outlawing slavery in 1804. Owens, who has said the moon landings were faked, explains that it wasn't white people's fault. Black people were selling black people, and life wasn't very good anyway. Some of the slaves came from places where cannibalism was on the menu, and
the stark reality is that our lives had very little value to our ancestors.
Slavery was so especially awful in Haiti that France struggled to replenish the slaves they worked to death. The average life expectancy for a slave there was 21 years, and anything up to 10% of the slaves died every year. So I don't really care if that was normal or not, it's abhorrent. But anyway, there are very few statistics or facts in Owens' video, and the purpose very much seems to be minimizing the legacy of slavery. Race hustlers, she calls anyone who wants to talk about this. Similar claims are made by Jeff Finn Paul, who is a lecturer in economic history and international studies at the University of Leiden. But not like those other historians.
This is simplistic, anti-historic thinking that has gained currency only because most practicing historians and history teachers have either given into groupthink or else have been cowed into silence by fear of losing their jobs.
He completely strawmans the anthropologist view, which, according to him, puts Native Americans on a pedestal, and he justifies colonialization by saying, everyone did it, the Native Americans weren't innocent anyway. And he even gets in a dog whistle about Native Americans being primitive farmers. But you know, not like the first Europeans who got to little Caribbean islands and cut down 90% of the trees. I suppose that wasn't primitive. Finn Paul's teleprompter argues, in a thin 5 minutes, that in fact Europeans in the last few hundred years were the first people to challenge remorseless conquest. As if the people who had these things done to them didn't challenge it. As if Homer wasn't challenging it 3,000 years ago. But you know, he's only a historian, why would he know that? As if the Bible doesn't challenge it. But the real reveal is right at the beginning.
If you teach generation after generation that their country, their society, and their history are uniquely awful, they are likely to believe you. This is a sure route to societal failure.
That, I think, is the real impetus for PragerU. Facts don't care about your feelings unless they disparage America, even if those awful things happened hundreds of years ago. In that case, the facts are so horrible they can make you think twice before wearing your Stars and Stripes pantsuit. With the same message, but far more insidious, is Leo and Layla Meet Christopher Columbus, aimed at children whose parents are in possession of the remote control.
How can you come here to the 15th century and judge me by your standards from the 21st century?
It presents Christopher Columbus, real name Christophorus Columbus, simply as a man of his time, who may have done things that are unacceptable today, but who was nevertheless remarkable for his accomplishments and ambition. It makes the case that we can't judge people in history by modern standards, and that doing so would be throwing away the past. But the video admits that not everyone throughout history thought these normal things were right. It mentions that Columbus had peaceful interactions with the Taino people, but not that 25 years after Columbus's arrival, most of the Taino, who numbered between a few 100,000 and 1 million when Columbus got there, were dead, with only 32,000 left alive. It also fails to mention that Columbus was brought back to Europe in chains, on Castile's orders, for tyrannical rule on its behalf on what is now the Dominican Republic. Columbus's men were, according to contemporary documents, cutting off people's noses, ears, and tongues for offences as trivial as insulting Columbus. The torture and persecution that came with Columbus to the places he discovered drove many indigenous people to suicide and ultimately extinction. He chopped off the hands of the natives who did not bring him gold. He sold 8-year-old girls into sex slavery. He was a sadistic butcher, even by the standards of the time. But that's not important.
Only my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ is perfect, and I hope to spread his teaching to all the lands I find that don't know his name.
Imagine this same reasoning applied to Hitler. Yes, he committed genocide, but genocide has occurred many times in human history, and really, anti-Semitism was very popular at the time. We shouldn't judge him by modern standards. After all, he did some good things too, and only Jesus is perfect. Do you think that's what they're teaching kids in Germany? This is not, by any means, the only Prague video with this message.
Future generations are never responsible for the sins of the past.
It's not immediately obvious why it's worth going from accept the facts no matter what to lying by omission in cases of history. I'm English, don't you know? And what the UK was doing in recent history was wrong. Executing and torturing Irish people, wrong. Colonialization, brutal, horrible, selfish, and wrong. The monarchy, outdated, and wrong. Ooh, on many levels. If that became a prevailing opinion in Britain, I don't think the UK would collapse. And even though I think a lot of what my country has done is wrong, I don't feel ashamed about it, because I didn't do it. But I suppose Prager's package is tying American exceptionalism with the belief that God, the Dennis Prager God, has to be involved with everything outside of worship, even though Prager's own views are contradictory. He says, in several places, that the only laws we need are the 10 Commandments. If we all followed them, we wouldn't even need the police. One of the 10 Commandments is, "Thou shalt not covet thy neighbour's wife," in Old English, or "Don't covet your neighbour's wife, you horny bastard." But then, he says that thinking things can't be evil. But that's what coveting is. It's a thought crime. And, we get this.
Would you use the word evil of animated child pornography? Because I certainly would.
No, I would use evil only with behavior. You didn't do evil if you thought evil. You did evil
if I'm
if you
masturbating
committed.
to animated pictures of pornography, I'm not doing something evil.
That's correct.
These sorts of extended interviews are where you can see who Dennis Prager really is and what PragerU is all about. Because in the PragerU videos, the self-righteousness is scripted and edited and the anger is veiled. But Prager actually loves, more than talking about what he thinks God is, talking about anything, especially in a space that will let him ramble.
We now have 3 generations of fools in America. The left seeks to undo what God did. I said we were in a civil war 20 years ago. We are. Thus far, thank God, it's not been violent. Well, it's not true. 2020 was filled with violence, but because it was all left-wing, it was never reported as such. Reshit Chochma Yirat Hashem. Wisdom begins with fear of God. There's no wisdom at Columbia because there's no God at Columbia. And do you know where your children learn to be ingrates? At college. You get a BA in ingratitude, a master's in ingratitude, and then a PhD in ingratitude. The great trait of the left is they're all ingrates. Every single damn one of them is an ingrate.
In July of 2023, the Florida Board of Education approved the use of PragerU Kids videos to be shown in K-12 schools as supplemental curriculum. This has happened mainly out of political maneuvering by the governor of Florida, Ron DeSantis, who said he supports education, not indoctrination. But here we are, with Florida classrooms cleared to use the cartoons of a group led by a man who this year said this.
All I heard was, well, because you indoctrinate kids. And which is true. We bring doctrines to children. That's a very fair statement. I said, but what is the bad of our indoctrination?
This certainly doesn't mean that PragerU Kids is going to turn up in every classroom in Florida, but it does mean it could. For sure, with so little educational content and so heavy a bias, these videos are harmful if they're taught as fact to children, and they're not exactly doing a service for the rest of the world either. And Prager's grasp, and certainly the reach of the Wilks brothers, is far and wide, but it all seems so desperate. Prager is outwardly hyper-concerned that America is becoming godless, but the vast majority of Americans still believe in God, and the decline has been very slow. He said before that he doesn't really like statistics, especially if they don't tell him things he doesn't already know, but he surely must know this. Really, his concern is far more political than religious. And frankly, I think that him speaking as if he is the mouth of all conservatives everywhere is a joke, when he is so obviously out on the extreme. Most conservative voters are not hyper-religious bigots, just like most liberals are not anarcho-communists. But the majority between those two extremes don't make the same video about it over and over. Like so many of these grifters, the most important part of Prager's religious interpretations are the ones he can wield. But if you look past the hot air, he's so obviously disingenuous, so full of illogical fallacies, and a total hypocrite. But that's like my opinion, man, not the word of God. Remember when Jesus said you should pay yourself $500,000 a year, not to mention all the money you make on your speaking engagements, and get divorced twice? Remember when Jesus said that 1 in 5 women experience sexual assault at college because the definition of sexual assault is too broad and you should just get over it? Remember when Jesus said, oh, and I think this is an actual quote, so let me just read that to you. When my wife was a waitress in her mid-teens, Mary Magdalene, the manager of her restaurant grabbed her breasts and squeezed them on numerous occasions. She told him to buzz off, figured out how to avoid being in places where they were alone, and continued going about her job. That's empowerment. That's a good lesson from Jesus. It all feels like the death throes of a fringe ideology voiced by a malignant narcissist who very much feels things he doesn't want to feel. Why do I need a multi-millionaire in the pocket of a billionaire to tell me what is moral? Thanks for watching. You can support me on Patreon, you can follow me on Twitter, Facebook, ring that bell. Bye-bye. Remember when Jesus said, "If a man pisseth on thy rug, because he has mistaken that man for you, thou shouldst pay with thine own rug." You remember that? Because I don't think that Big Prager, you know, it was Seymour Hoffman that sorted that out. Do you remember when Jesus said, "We got to indoctrinate the kids, we need to indoctrinate the kids"? Remember when Jesus said, "It's okay to masturbate to child abuse imagery, as long as it's animated"? Remember when Jesus said, "The rich shall be first and the poor shall be last"? Do you remember when Jesus met Mary Magdalene and he went, "Oh, a prostitute"? Remember when Jesus said, "The problem with Judea is that we don't have a faith-based government"? Remember when Jesus said, "Marital rape, not a big deal. In fact, legally, it can't be rape"? Remember when Jesus said that the most important commandment isn't not murder people, it's honour thy father and do what thou is toldeth? Remember when Jesus said, "Boys like trucks and girls like dollies, it's obvious"? Remember when Jesus said that the most important thing about a woman is her smile? And then he went and visited some lepers, and they were just worthless because they couldn't even smile because they didn't have faces. And there's a whole bit written about it, and I've read it, and it's called Leprechaunus. It's gross. Remember when Jesus said, "I've noticed that women aren't as horny as men around me"? Remember when Jesus said conservatives value truth, but liberals value lies? Remember when Jesus said all the universities are woke? Remember when Jesus said, "Hey up, darling, you'd look a lot better with a smile"? Remember when Jesus said that sexual assault wasn't a big deal? You can choose what to be traumatized by. Remember when Jesus said, "All these people, they just think I'm so damn funny"? Do you remember when Jesus said, "AIDS is punishment from God"? Do you remember when Jesus said, "The Roman Empire is fake news"? Do you remember when Jesus said, "Do you dress like that on a weekday"?